Truth may seem but cannot be. Beauty cannot she. As well as truth and beauty buried be. With those words, we welcome you to World Poetry Day discussion on Good Morning Anambra. Today we'll be exploring spoken word as an art form. Today is World Poetry Day, and we begin to look at issues and forms. How is poem a very important aspect of human life, and how can it be used to improve on people's living standard in the society? This morning we have Dr. Chiko Okoye, Associate Professor of Poetry and University Deputy Orator, Anambra University, Oka, join us on the show this morning.
Good morning.
We also have another poet, Chisom Udoba, and Anchor Creative Forum on Anambra Broadcasting Service. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right. With both of them, we'll be looking at poetry, especially on performance poetry, spoken word as an art form. Let's begin this way. What is poem? Before we look at that spoken word, what is it that we see we know this is poem?
Okay. Recently, I was interviewed maybe 3 days ago by BBC about forms of poetic expression. Now, when you say what is poetry, I make bold to say that it defies definition. Okay. But you can describe. That's where we have a leeway. You can describe. Okay, so when you want to describe poetry, you can start with the form and the content. What I normally tell my students is, once it doesn't run flush to the end of the page, it looks like a poem. Okay, prose runs from one end to the other, but once it cuts short, you start saying, this looks like a piece of poetry. But of course, you could say Bible verses also cut short. Those are verses. My lecturer will always tell me those days, all poetry is in verse, but not all verse is poetry. Now we come to the content. Is it cryptic enough? Is it condensed? Is it concise? Does it make you think? Does it bring beauty? Does it act on the process or the construct of dolce et utile?
What's that?
Instructing while pleasing. It's good to the ear, but there's a message. That's when you start to think, this looks like poetry. Description 1. We could go on, and we'll not go home today.
I like the word you used, instructing while pleasing.
Yeah.
Do you always write poem with that in mind? Or is it just an expression of what is somewhere in your soul?
Of course, you will express. Let me give you an example. William Blake, from Auguries of Innocence, he says, to see a world in a grain of sand. Can you imagine seeing a world in a grain of sand? And beauty in a wild flower. You hold eternity in the palm of your hand and infinity in an hour. You sit back and you start thinking.
Well, this is realistic.
But the beauty is in the fact that you are being pleasured by the thought of seeing infinity in an hour. Eternity in your palm. Beauty in a wild flower. And a world in a grain of sand. That's it. Okay, you could picture, let's come back home. You could picture our own Christopher Kibo, the popular Mother Idoto. Okay? Before you, Mother Idoto, naked I stand. Okay? Leaning on an oil being lost in your legend. I'm just jumping the lines. Under your power, wait I, on barefoot, watchman for the watchword. You start thinking, okay, from Mother Idoto, he has already come down to the Bible, watchman for the watchword. You start thinking. The thought process alone is not there to make you worry. It's there to bring pleasure. But at the same time, you wear this wistful smile on your face and you say, there is something here. And you continue nodding.
Even when you worry. Okay, so
do you
share the same definition experience with Doc? Yes, I do. Poetry, according to what he said, poetry is not something you could just put in one enclosed cup and say this is what it is. It differs to different people. Some might say this is what it is, some might say no, this is not what it is. According to William Wordsworth, he said poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotion recollected in tranquility. To me, I would say poetry is one of the journeys of literature that allows for expression of emotion, feeling, concerns through words, verses, and in a concise way that allows people to understand what you're trying to express.
Yeah. When they don't understand it, wow.
Most times people say they don't understand, but I think they should give it more time. They should give him more time, and surely they will understand.
Let me take for example. I want us to, in as much as we look at these issues, go the poetry way, but let's not be too deep for a layman audience to understand us on screen. Okay. But even at that, when you talk about poems by someone like Wole Soyinka are very difficult to understand.
Why do I have a feeling you will go there?
No, sorry, I like poems, but I always have issues with Wole Soyinka's presentation. Okay. Even his novels at times. You know how difficult it is. Right. So when you talk about these expressions, the will I call it the mind tumor that some people go through just to get the message, does it actually achieve its purpose?
Of course, let me be honest with you. I teach poetry. I've taught poetry for many years. Okay. I try as much as possible to make people understand that, see, if you run into a difficult one, leave it. But leave it doesn't mean leave it forever, okay? Look for ones that will make you enjoy. Sooner or later you will get there, just like she said. Soyinka, for somebody to run into a Soyinka-esque poet, you will have problems, depending on the one you run into actually. If you run into Abiku, I think it's quite accessible. If you run into telephone conversation, once you have sarcasm as part of your makeup, you will understand what he's trying to say. But when you run into poems like Idonre,
exactly,
then you start having problems. But you will need a guide, of course. If you run into poems by people like maybe Tanuro Ojaide, it's simple, it flows. It doesn't mean that the simplicity is negative, but you tend to understand what he's saying. Let me debate a little. People say Achebe is simple. It's not true. Maybe he uses simple expressions, but the thought processes are
usually deep.
They're very, very deep.
And usually interpretations given to them varies according to the person.
That's the bane of literature. The interpretations are infinite, but there is always a mainstream you cannot afford to deviate from. Okay, you cannot say Idonre is about a small lump of sand. No, it's actually a hill, and the things that happened when he went on a personal pilgrimage.
Before we go that far, I would like to ask this question before we go on a short break.
Okay.
Is spoken word poem? This argument is...
It's not an argument.
It continues.
It's poetry.
Is it poetry?
Poetry.
But some people disagree with that.
What's that thing I learned when I read Mascom? Opinions are free. Facts are sacred. Comments are personal. So anybody can say anything. But as far as I'm concerned, it's like saying that people in Igbo, Naamambem, are not poets. It's funny. Okay? They are traditional poets. And the tradition has, in this post-colonial era, done a loop back to what our forefathers were doing. That's why you see spoken word. But it takes on contemporary issues now.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Spoken word, Imambem, and then performance poetry.
I know I have run into a problem with Imambem.
They are beginning to look as if there are new forms of art. But we'll look at those when we'll come back. We went to the street to ask questions on what people think about World Poetry Day. This is, will I call it street angle to our discussions this morning. Stay with us.
A relaxed form of communication. Poetry is that basket that the Groit uses to praise and uses to caution and uses to condemn. Poetry is actually more like a steer. It steers the society towards the right direction by the way they form, by the way the art form is in itself. So it contributes a lot to the development of every society in every generation.
So it helps to develop the thinking faculty. There are two sides to our brain. There is the thinking part, there is the acting part. When you are thinking of the right words, it helps you to develop just one thing. Your thinking ability increases. And if your thinking can increase, it will begin to think positive directions to add value to the society.
Poetry is a language, is a means of communication, and it helps to pass the message across to the individuals, the society, some messages that can be passed to the government or to the society and the public. So poetry is a means where you be able to express yourself.
The poetry has gone a long way in changing the lives of people, especially
especially the educated, because that is when I will put it. It's when the educated, because one, it passes messages, information. Two, it also changes the mindset of people.
Those who grasp the meaning of the words in that thing uses it very, very effective in their lifestyle, and that's exactly what it is, either literally or otherwise.
All right, it's still good morning, Anambra, and today is World Poetry Day. If you're just joining us, just get ready for, minutes of performance, beautiful performances coming from here. And we're looking at spoken word as an art form. We want to balance the thought process. I have Dr. Chiko Okoye, Associate Professor of Poetry from Anambra University, and Chisomo Doba, also a poet, join us on the show. Let me bring this to, she's a contemporary writer. To you do spoken word.
Yes, I do.
But it seems as if at times we think this Imambem, those Igbo cultural performances, these are local. Let's go to English. Maybe that's poem.
I don't really think so.
Okay.
Basically, I think poetry, language form in a poem adds beauty to it. When you're able to put your local language, pidgin, and any type of language which you can use and can speak in your poem, it adds beauty, makes people to be able to relate to what you're doing. When you're performing an Igbo poem here in the eastern part of Nigeria, people tend to relate to you more, they tend to understand more. When you go to the west, you could do Yoruba, you could mix it with English too. They call it Yoruba English. You could mix it, and people tend to relate more with it.
Okay, let's come to you, Chike.
Right.
What is spoken word to start with?
Okay, let me get a little technical here. When you write a piece of poetry, okay, it's there on the page. You could have a reading. You could recite that poem to an audience. It's a different subgenre. What I mean by subgenre is people want to hear it from your own voice. You are the author of the poem. People want to hear you speak the poem. That's a different subgenre. Now, spoken word combines a lot more than reciting your poetry. Those ones are recitals. Spoken word requires that you perform your poetry. It's a different thing. So you add mnemonics and kinesics, body movement, gestures. Of course, it's extempore. You don't use paper. It's impromptu, right there. Even if you memorized it, okay? I could look up and say, and I look back at you. I'm performing. Looking up and looking down at you, I've already engaged your senses. But when I say, there's a difference. Now, the first rendition is spoken word. The second one is a recital.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I go further?
No, bring in Mbem now. Let's see the spoken word and the Mbem.
Of course, before I do the Mbem thing, the spoken word could be in any language. Okay. Like she said, the important thing is the communication. You could do it in pidgin. In fact, most spoken word poems in Nigeria today combine everything.
Okay.
What people look at is the performance. Okay, I've met a spoken word poet from Ghana, and I watched him perform, and he performed with Akan, English, Ghanaian pidgin, and not everything was lost to us, because where we couldn't understand, because it was an international audience, where we couldn't understand, his gestures drove the message home. Okay, so my forte, my most current concern is the masquerade chant, which I say is poetry. I always say this all the time, okay? When a masquerade looks at you and says, this is a warning. It's not playing with you.
Chike, no, how does this game come? I know that originally spoken words come from perhaps African American source, but the present day, no.
Okay.
The present day spoken word. Where is the source? Do you just wake up and say something?
No.
Do you get it anywhere?
No.
Any literal word?
Performance is performance. The African American thing, where are they from? Where are they from? They're from Africa. Yeah. And Africa is known for performance. What was that thing that confused white men when they came to Africa? They said, the nights are alive. drums always throbbing. Do these people ever sleep? But the drums talk. If you listen to Pericom of blessed memory, boom, 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 there's a message. But the white man does not understand. So he thinks the voodoo, they have come again. But the person you are talking to knows what
understands it.
Yeah. So spoken word still, I'm not saying it is exclusive only to Africa. Okay? But when you mention African Americans, remember where are they from? They're still from Africa. Okay? So today, people believe that, like one researcher said earlier, this death of publications, death of people having reading culture has made people, we are more interested in watching things than reading things, especially reading things on print, paper, not social media. Okay? Even social media, we read with our eyes. We want to be entertained. Okay? So spoken word has gotten this audience now because people want to see a performance. People want to see music to their ears. People want to see you twist messages in a way that...
When you now talk about music to your ear, I want to give these questions both of you, and then we also look at the future generation sustaining poem and raising new generation of poets.
Okay.
Now, hip-hop and some other genres of music seems to be dominating, and the interest of the younger generation in poem and this spoken word seems to have dwindled. Do you think poems still have a place? Will it meet this competition?
Let's look at this. What do you call hip-hop? You see? Come here on a corner, woman up. You're doing something like this, right? Good. What is spoken word? If you are a Gala, don't you come here and hold me. If you are a Idoma, don't you come here and hug me. Hausa and Fulani, are you not brothers? I'm already gesticulating. I don't need a beat behind it. There could also be a beat if there is that kind of option. But the thing is, because we listen to music as per music, we now call that genre hip-hop. And of course, hip-hop rhymes. There's a message there. It contains poeticisms. But I wouldn't necessarily call it spoken word because it has its own genre that is, well delineated. It is defined.
Spoken word doesn't rhyme?
No, rhyme is not the only thing, okay? Would you do in spoken word?
All right, so you, Chisom, do you think the new generation can still fit into this culture of poem?
Yes. In as much as you might say people can maybe relate more to music, but poetry is those sometimes it could be like music, but it's like a higher form. It doesn't just focus on the musicality and the rhyme and everything. It focuses more on the language, the message you're trying to pass. Even though there's still the place for the sound, the rhythm, rhyme, alliteration, and everything, but people can still relate to it. The younger generation too can relate to it. That's where spoken word poetry comes in because it's an easier form of poetry.
So how do we raise a new generation of these poets? The likes of Chino and Christopher Kibo, these people that are very familiar or similar to Nigeria when you mention poem.
And she belongs to the new generation.
Of course. She's new generation.
Okay, I think basically we can start catching them young. First of all, we could let people know poetry. You can express yourself through poems. You can do wonderful things through poem. Poetry can aid societal uplift. You can let them know, and with time, their interest will keep growing. And sure, they would do it.
Where does comedy come in all this?
Comedy? Well...
Is it part of spoken words?
Is it really? Except there is a specific job comedy will play in your spoken word. Then it could be an addendum. But spoken word is spoken word. Spoken word is spoken word. And I want to add something to what she said. You see, there's this thing about nobility and higher form. Okay? If you set up a jazz center, like a friend of mine wants to do, now he wants to play jazz here and there in select places, you find out that there's going to be select clientele going there. The people who still understand jazz, they simply sit down, sip on water or anything that is their choice, and listen to jazz. But some other person will choose to go to where, the more popular street music is played. It's a matter of choice. Of course, you will see me in the jazz place.
Okay, let me ask this final question before we now go into the performance formally. Many people say that poem is, will I call it an escape for literary critics? It doesn't contribute anything to changing a societal course. Do you at all share this view with them?
No, of course, it's no, but you want me to explain why it's no. You see, what someone does not understand does not minimize the efficacy of that thing. Okay? Yes, you could relax. After all, the world is very serious now. So maybe you read a few lines and it brings down your adrenaline. I mean, you live longer. Or of course, also, you could remind people of something by reciting a poem, by doing a performance, or by telling them, go and read this. You could ginger something, you could engender something in somebody. Okay? What's that quote by Wilfred Owen about war? You know, when you see the younger generation and they see the military men in uniform, it's so attractive. Until you see them crying when they are shot on battlegrounds. You will hate the military after that. But a poet has already caught this much earlier, after the First World War. He said something about pro patria mori. He said it in Latin as in, it is good and beautiful to fight for one's country until you understand that there is no glory in dying.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's now do the practical thing. There's no way you'll talk
That's
about...
the practical question.
So we'll still come back to you. Okay, Jisom, let's start with you. You are not escaping it.
Oh, no, I'm caught.
Okay, this piece is titled Fall in Love with the Poet. Today is World Poetry Day, and I think there's no better day to tell people to fall in love with the poets and the act of poetry. You should fall in love with the poets, with the musicality of the words, the flow, glow, the spark we bring to your eyes, the glitters inside. Don't call this a brag, because we won't drag. The aesthetics of words we understand, the beauty they carry, popping thoughts in your head, painting pictures in your mind, forcing you to think and rethink. When we say we love, we do. And we show in ways creative, subtle, but loud. With our mix of words turned in love, arranged in lines, stanzas, verses, in different languages you just have to understand. Don't listen to those that say poets don't have money. Because the honey wrapped in our words, even money cannot buy. Should we try? Even the creator is a poet. You can see his lines in the Psalms of David. Psalms, Proverbs, the book of Ephesus. His slimmest line of poetry, Jesus wept. We say that which you may and that which you may not. Do that which you should and that which you should not. We perish through the affairs of a country, discover its decadence. They call us prophets.
We should have then we'll go this far so that Doug will also give us a performance.
This is good, very good.
Well, Ezonwuji told me, well, it would be good if we have interpolarity. Since you have spoken in English, my Mbems, I don't memorize. I simply use what is there to talk. Onye ka eji akọbala akọbalụ Chike Nwokoye abịanụnụ onyonyo a na-enyo n'ọkụ a na-enwunu asị m kwuba okwu mgbe m nwa aja agụ makwada agụ ka m si ejenu Chisom Udobe iji etokwenu to ka ndị ọgbọgọ ma tokarị abụ etokarị nwanna amụnụ ị na-amụcharị nínú kedu mgbe mmọnwụ ya nwụọ wee dịdị ka gị agbọghọbịa be mụnụ akụkọ maka na-energe enenu onye ka eji akọbala akọbala bụkwa ka esi nọba anọbanụ nwaanyị anọ nwoke anọkwa nwaanyị nọkwa nwoke nọkwanụ mkpụrụ ahụ na-abụ nkụtụkọ n'eme ogbeke ka ọ dị n'ime ụkpaka dịkwa n'ime ogbeke onye ka eji agwaba na agwabanụ onye kamera mụfụ na amụnụ onye mụrụ amụ dị ndụ mmadụ nwụọ ma ghọrọ mmanwụ nwụọ ọghọrọ ajụkwụ nwanne m ekenekwa m ụnụ aja
Those are the beauty of this kind of days, you know. We bring back the memories, this beauty, and then as well, some of the ladies that have been wowed by poem. All right, this is how I would go on the discussion. Sorry. Sorry, we won't be able to take you again. That's how far we'll go on our discussion on World Poetry Day. Dr. Chike Okoye, Associate Professor of Poetry and University Deputy Orator, Anambra University, joined us on the show this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
We also have Chisom Udobe, a poet, and Anchor Creative Forum on Anambra Broadcasting Service.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, I'm David Okwasile, but the discussion continues after now. IJ is also with me.
Thank you.
Stay with us.